Good morning. So what we're going to do today is we're going to get rolling on our first basic landscape. Now today it'd just be background, sky, grass, clouds. Okay, but we're going to kind of follow in with our lesson from Bob Ross. Now as I told you guys the other day when we were watching the video, hey, there's some things that we're going to do like Bob Ross, there's some things that we have to do differently, primarily because of what we use. He's using oil paint on canvas. We're using tempera paint on mat boards. So, you know, his paint's thicker. Takes a long time to dry. He can work different ways. Our paint's different, so we're going to work a little bit different. So today you're going to have two brushes. You're going to have a 1-inch brush, and those numbers are on the metal, and a 1/2-inch brush. Okay, big guy, little guy. All right, so we're going to take the little guy, throw him out of the way for a little while. We're only going to use him at the very end. We're going to use this for primarily 95% of our painting. We're not even going to wash it out. We're just going to roll with it. That's a beautiful thing about landscape paintings. We may have 10 colors in this thing by the time we're done. Okay, so if you guys remember with Bob Ross, before he ever laid any color onto his canvas, he primed his canvas. He covered it with a coat of liquid white. Reason being, just like this board that you're going to be using, the canvas kind of acts like a sponge, and it will soak up all of that paint that you put on there. So it gets pasty and it doesn't spread, it doesn't blend. You put the primer on there and paint over it while it's wet, so the paint does slide around, it does blend. Okay, but the big difference between Bob Ross and us is he primed his whole entire canvas. We can't do that. Our paint dries much too quickly, so we're just going to prime the areas that we're painting. So it's just going to kind of prime an area, paint that area, so on and so forth. So today what we're going to do is we're going to kind of figure out what's going to be sky, what's going to be ground. So you just need to figure out where you want your horizon line. I'm going to say halfway. Okay, if you want yours to be a hill, to be straight across, doesn't matter. So whatever you consider your sky, that top half of my paper, I'm going to prime it white. Now before you do that, I want you to realize you need to stick to left to right brush movements, brush strokes, left to right. Okay, this is a very thin paint. You know, unlike Bob Ross's paint where he was using oil paint, it's thick and it just goes on thick. Well, this stuff's so thin, you see every brush stroke that you make. So if you're going in crisscross patterns or circles, you're going to see that like grain on wood. Okay, so you don't have to put it on an inch thick like icing on a cake. We just want a nice thin coat of white, just enough to make our paint glide and blend a little better. So you can see I've done about halfway up. All right, so when Bob Ross started painting his sky, you know, he just came in with some blue and was doing some X patterns. We can't do that. All right, that's a big difference between oil paint and tempera paint. Ooh, just throwing brushes around. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use what we call the double dip method, and that's essentially just like what it sounds like. I'm going to be dipping two colors into my paint, into my brush. All right, so number one, we need to decide where our light source is. So let's just say light source is up here. So everything's going to go light to dark. Okay, right side's going to be a little darker than the left side. So when I start double dipping, always the second color I dip is what shows up more. Okay, so since we're doing sky, we're going to use blue and white. That's my big old messy paint tray there. Okay, so I'm essentially going to do just like I said. I'm going to go blue and then straight into the white. So now I've got blue and white on the brush. Now, just like value, I'm going to start in the darkest area and move towards the light source. Now, something I want you to remember, the harder you press, the more this is just going to blend into one blue. We don't want just a light blue covering our sky. It's going to look cartoonish. You know, if you look at a sky, it's got light blue, dark blue, whites. So we want these mixture of colors. So kind of like you do with a pencil when you want to lighten up your grip, you move it towards the eraser. I'm going to grab my brush right here around these holes, just very lightly. I'm not going to press very hard, because I want these streaks of all these different blues and whites. So if you notice right there, I'm not getting just one flat light blue, I'm getting all these different types of blues. Okay, so I'm just lightly pulling that across, because you guys know from value when we did our blending, as I pull it towards a light source, it's going to get lighter. Okay, so what I don't want is I don't want this to all blend into one blue. Okay, so now we said the left side's lighter, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some straight shots of white, and I'm going to start them on this side and pull them to the center. Okay. And then on my right side, since it's supposed to be darker, I'm going to come back with some straight shots of blue. Now this is really what's going to make the difference. I don't want to blend it in. I just want to create some darker blues over here. So now we're getting the feeling of light. Let's get that back in the center. Lighter and darker. Okay, this side's a little darker, that side's a little lighter, and that's what we want. Okay, You know, we want our right side just a little darker because that's going to be farther from the light source. All right, so now we've kind of done our double dipping. Now remember, you can pause and rewind and stop and whatever you got to do with this video. I'm just going to roll through it because YouTube does not like long videos. Okay, so now it leaves our grass. We are not going to prime our grass white because if we go white and we start working green over the top of it, it's going to mix into like that pastel baby green. Okay, we don't want that. All right, so I'm not going to rinse my brush out. I don't really want any water in my brush because I have water-based paint and it's going to make it more watery. All right, so I'm just going to kind of take my paper towel or even your construction paper laying around, and I kind of try to just try to wipe off the excess paint. All right, we're trying to just kind of halfway clean it off without really getting our paintbrush wet. Okay. A lot of artists have towels and whatnot sitting around them. Okay, so what we are going to do is I'm going to prime my grass yellow. Okay, just flat yellow because yellow and blue make green. Well, I've already got a little bit of blue in my brush, so I'm going to end up with a little bit of a lime, you know, like a yellow-green anyway. Just left to right brush strokes. Remember, no crisscrosses. Don't be afraid to come over here and overlap your sky a little bit. You don't want like this little white halo of separation between them. Okay? So now that we've got it primed, remember our left side's lighter, our right side's darker. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my brush here, mix up a little green. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double dip like I did in my sky, but this time for my left side I'm going to double dip green and a little blue. Then when I work to the right side I'm going to go double dip green and a little yellow. Okay. So let's just start with my plain old greens here. Let's just start brushing that in a little bit. Mixed up a little darker than I wanted, but that's okay. We're double dipping so we can manipulate this and control it. Okay, so notice I'm kind of pulling over, kind of letting it kind of fade off over here by the yellow. Now I'm going to come in with some of those straight shots of blue. Let that mix in with my yellow, my green a little bit. See how? Let's go green and blue. There we go. Now you can kind of see how dark that's getting. Okay. Keep brushing it. Remember, I'm going light. I'm not pressing hard. If I press hard, it's just going to mix all to one color, and we don't want one color. Okay, we want multiple different greens and whatnot. Okay, I'm going to kind of wipe my brush off a little bit. I'm going to come back with the straight yellow on the other side. Start working this stuff in a little bit. Still had a little bit of that green paint in my brush. So now you're getting the feeling of lighter and darker. Not trying to blend it all to one color. I want all these different. So a couple things you want to look at when you're doing your sky and your ground. Number one, if it turns out just a regular light blue or a regular green, probably pressing too hard. Okay. Number two, if you feel like somebody took a ruler and drew right down the middle of your paper and said, oh, that's light and that's dark, you want to make sure they're kind of weaving in and out of one another. You see how we're doing there? Kind of gives it more of a realistic feel. All right, so sometimes I will even take a tiny bit of black. You know, if the top left's my light source, I would venture to say bottom right's my darkest. Sometimes right in that bottom corner, I'll brush in just a tad bit of black and pull that over so it really feels like it's getting dark. Okay, so once we get the grass where we want it, and you get it however you think you want it to be, you got your lights and your darks, you got your weaving in and out of colors, I'm just going to take that brush, I'm going to set it in my cup of water. I'm done with it. Don't ever leave a brush out and let the paint dry in it. Once paint dries in the brush, you got to throw that brush away. Done. Okay? So the reason we started our sky first is because with our type of paint, it's so watery that we can't work paint over paint. Okay? We have to let it dry and come back and work over the top of it. So we did sky first so we can come back and put in some clouds. Okay? All right, had to do a little refill of white, sorry. Okay, so now we're going to add in some clouds. A couple things I want you to think about before we ever do clouds. Okay, number one, we're going to have the half-inch brush. Okay, a lot of my students, their clouds look like cotton ball poofs, just poofs, circle poofs, straight in a row. Okay, number one, clouds don't have a definite shape. Okay, so try to stay away from the cotton ball. Number two, clouds don't go on a straight row across the sky, so you're going to have them different all over the place. So bottom line is what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with white, and I'll get white on my brush. I'm just going to pat at it, just like that. Okay. I usually kind of start with a central area. I'll get it really white, then I'll kind of pull it left and right. Now, another thing I want you to remember about clouds is, you know, in a cloud you may have one spot that's so white that it's just you can't. It's just intense white. Then there may be a spot right next to it, same cloud, that you see right through. That's something I want you to keep in mind. Okay. Notice I'm just kind of patting at it like a sponge. Wipe off some of that excess paint. I'm going to take what I got. I'm just going to kind of pull it out. Okay. Have to come back in and add some spots of white. I like to always have one or two feel like they're kind of going off the page, so it looks like a real photograph. Remember from the other day, he would have these, sometimes these little, what he called wisps. All right. Now, what you'll notice is when you get over here on the left side, if yours is like mine and it gets a little lighter in the white area, sometimes you got to touch a little blue in there. Okay. So I'm just kind of patting at it like a sponge. Just kind of pulling it out different ways, not just making sure they don't have any particular shape to them. You know, if you want, you could even come back in a couple spots, add a little bit of blue in them. I see no problem with that. Sometimes that blue really helps make them look see-through in some spots. You notice I'm not trying to really overwork, just a little bit here and there, just a little bit. As Bob Ross would say, gonna have some clouds that are happy. Okay, so not a lot to it. Light first left, we're double dipping, pulling left from the right. Left side's lighter, right side's darker. So once you get to this point and you get your clouds how you want, you're done with this. Now, something I want you to remember as you go up for your cleanup, these brushes hold a ton more paint and they're a little bit tougher to get clean, so you're going to have to take a little more time to clean your brushes. Okay? Good luck.